Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Inside Housing Communications Masterclass. My name's Emma Maier. I'm the editor of Inside Housing, and I will be chairing the session this morning. Communications is undoubtedly one of the biggest challenges facing the sector. We're in election year. Housing is on the agenda, but I'm sure that, like the Inside Housing journalists, all of our attendees today will probably be keeping a keen eye on that Mori poll of top election issues, and you'll be well aware that housing, which was hovering at number 7 within that all-important top 10 for some time, has now slipped to number 11. Clearly, it's important for us to engage the general public in thinking about the housing crisis and understanding what it is and what it means for them. That involves helping to redefine the way that they think about the housing crisis. It's not just an issue affecting middle-class parents who are finding that their kids are coming home from university and coming back to stay in the family home. Clearly, it's a much bigger issue than that, but that really is the way that it's being defined in the media at the moment. So for housing associations and housing organisations more generally, there is a huge challenge to get out there to help redefine that housing crisis, and also, of course, to get the message out about who they are and what they do. And that's why this is going to be an issue which Inside Housing covers in depth in the year ahead and continues to return to. So this webinar is here to look at how we do just that. We're going to be exploring the key challenges and how you can influence journalists on in the national press and in the trade press, and we'll touch very briefly on the local press as well. So I'd like to welcome our panellists for this morning. We have with us today Anna Brosnan, who's Head of Media, Digital and Campaigns at the National Housing Federation, Alex Wellman, reporter at Trinity Mirror, Martin Hilditch, who of course is Deputy Editor at Inside Housing, and I shall also be chipping in with my 2 pence worth as well. So we shall get started in just a moment with the discussion, but before we do, a few housekeeping notes just to help you navigate the webinar software and to understand how it's going to work. The session is going to be much like a face-to-face panel session at an event, but with a few added benefits. So like a live session, each panellist will talk through their slides, and then we'll move on to a question and answer session at the end, which I will chair. Unlike a face-to-face panel discussion, you can submit questions at any time through the software. You have the option of being on a full screen mode, and if you're using the full screen mode, you'll see a little menu at the top, and if you click on that, there will be a Q&A box, and you can use that to enter your question at any time. If you're not in full screen mode, you should see the Q&A box in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. So do feel free to start asking some questions as soon as the presentation starts. I can see that many of you are already having a chat with Martin, so that's good. I'll endeavour to get through as many questions as possible during the session. But in the meantime, the panellists will also be able to provide some written answers in the Q&A box as we proceed. At the end of the session, a transcript of the written question and answers will be available to download, and you'll also be able to download the slides from the webinar. All you need to do is to go onto the Inside Housing website and click on the webinar section, and you'll be able to download it from there. So without further ado, it's time for us to move on to our first presentation of this morning. So I would like to hand over to Anna to take us through her slides. Anna, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Emma, and welcome everybody. Thanks for having me today. So I'm working at the National Housing Federation and been asked to talk through what our current media and campaigning strategy is. So in order to do that, we kind of need to go back to 2010. When housing really wasn't an election issue for most people. Housing actually, as you can see, was down on a par with public transport and below Afghanistan. It wasn't really up on people's radar back in 2010. And this was the poster that we put up just after the general election. We put it up in Westminster Station so the MPs would see it. And we put up this poster because nobody was really talking about housing. And with hindsight, when we think about why that was, mainly because our messages were really detailed. We had a lot of different voices saying different things. We probably talked a bit too much to ourselves within the sector. And what we were asking for was really quite detailed. So as a result, we didn't win over the public, and the politicians therefore didn't need to listen to us as much because the public weren't asking for it. As I say, we use a lot of technical language, and this had a real impact on housing associations' business, because 6 months after the election, the budget for housing was cut by over 60%. So, what are we doing differently this time? Oh, wrong button, there we go. So this time we're going to be using the Home to Britain campaign, which I hope you're all aware of already, and I know many associations already signed up and working with us on this one. The campaign unifies the whole of the housing sector with supporters from across it, from the architects to the builders to the developers. And that sends a really strong message to the government that we're all on the same page demanding change. It isn't just us calling out as a lone voice anymore. We've got our one joint message that we're all calling for, which is that we want all political parties to commit to ending the housing crisis within a generation. And we want the next government to publish a long-term plan within a year of taking office that sets out how they will achieve this. So this time we very much changed our focus, that rather than asking for the detail, we're pushing the bigger message, which will have a lot more resonance with audiences. The housing crisis has taken us more than a generation to create, so it's not the fault of any one government. But we also recognise that it will take more than a generation to get out of it. We need a long-term plan, so no more of these short-term measures like help to buys and things like that, which actually don't address the fundamentals. So our aims are pretty simple as well. These are the aims of our strategy, which first and foremost to create this political space for housing, which if we go back to 2010 wasn't really done. We need to articulate the unique offer of housing associations. So we have a myriad of different problems in the housing market that we need to address, and actually housing associations are primed and ready to take care of most of those, be it whether it's shared ownership or care for older people or housing younger people or rural or inner city issues. There's a lot they can do. And we also want to secure the policy commitments from the three main parties as well, which are our own ones. But above all of that, I think crucially it's that we need to start engaging with the public and making housing an issue people talk about. Because if the public aren't asking for it and making demands of it, then the politicians don't need to listen to them and they don't need to listen to us. So that first one, creating political space for housing, really is first and foremost a key part of our media and comms strategy. We've got three simple key messages, as all comms people, good comms people should have. So you can read those yourselves, but ours are that there's a housing crisis in the UK, which means people across the country are struggling to find the homes that they need at a price they can afford. And that isn't just an issue of the affordability in the south and London and the southeast primarily. That really is across the country where people can't find the right homes at the right prices, whether it's to buy or to rent. It's taken us a generation to get into this mess, and it will take us a generation to get back out of it again. That really is recognising that housing isn't one of those policies or areas that can be fixed by a lot of short-term measures. It really does need a long, sustained campaign to get us building again, much as we did after the Second World War in the 50s and 60s. And we're calling on all political parties to commit to end the housing crisis within a generation. And as I've just said, we want them to publish that plan within a year of taking office. And it's important that we're calling on all the political parties. This isn't a political partisan campaign in any way. We need everyone to work together, and who knows what kind of government we'll end up with after this election, so it really is important that they're all on board with it. So if our media strategy's aim is to create the space for housing, we need to raise the general awareness of how the housing crisis affects everyone. And here's an example of some of the pieces we've done recently. I realise they're based on a recent London story we did, but we obviously are working around the country on stories. So unlike the last election period, I think we need to show the impact the housing crisis is having on the lives of people every day. We've taken the messaging back to the audience and what it is that they kind of want to hear. So because housing affects the whole public, it's quite hard to do such generalist audiences. So we've split it down a little bit. So we're talking about renters, we talk about older people, we're talking about young families and parents, like so-called squeeze middle, and we talk about and first-time buyers. So we do have a lot of broad audiences to cover, but they're all key people affected by the housing crisis in some way, especially the kind of the renters in our advertising that we'll be doing soon. They were identified as a real key group of people that are very active, very keen to vote, but who are very disaffected by the housing crisis. So our tactics are to put out weekly stories, targeting those audiences. We do that through commissioning new polling, new research. You'll have seen over the last few months we've done quite a bit on younger people and on renters, and we're about in a few weeks to release a report on older people and what older people think about the housing crisis and how they're affected. We regularly meet with journalists, so we've been building a lot of relationships with a lot of the national and key regional press, obviously in the trade press. So we're trying to kind of get into those leader pieces and provide the commentary, because they're a very good way into the ears of the politicians. We'll be starting some regional editorial campaigns in the target areas, which are kind of the target constituencies that Ed Miliband, Nick Clegg, David Cameron, George Osborne all have, so in their local papers, so they'll start to see it as well. And to match those regional editorial campaigns, we'll be doing advertising, and so we're picking all the prime local seats. That will be going out around April time, which is when the government should be in the purdah period, when the government's being closed down, and they'll all go back to their local seats and start doing their local campaigning, so it's tied in very much to kind of reach them at home as well. And of course, to top it all about, we'll have strong links to social media, so we're creating a lot of new content and shareable content. We've got the Home to Britain hashtag that we're using. Social media is a really key part, because that's kind of more personal stuff that people share, so we're doing a lot more on the kind of Twitter feeds and making more graphics and things that we can share, because that's another way to reach people. And again, the campaigning that we're doing is also linking to that, really targeting people who are already interested in housing to get them brought into that. We've done several phases of the campaign, so from the initial launch in September, for those of you who are at our annual conference, you remember that's when we officially launched it all, and we've since then had a sustained period of pushing out the stories, and that will continue up until the rally on the 17th of March. Then we'll kind of switch to pushing out the more editorial regional campaigns during that purdah period when they're in the constituencies, as well as some final big pushes to the national media in the run-up to the election. And as we go, we've been evaluating all of this. It's a trickier one for us, because although the Federation is putting out the stories, it's also much more about the message penetration for us. So those key messages I mentioned earlier, we're evaluating those to see what the penetration of each of those messages, and see how they're kind of getting across in all the target papers that we've put into the campaign. So the next bit is how we kind of tell this story. Housing is obviously affects everyone, and it's been going on for a generation, as I've said. So it's kind of the old classic, how do you tell a story in a new way? Because housing crisis isn't a new story. So explain the picture. You've got the classic thing of a dog bites a man isn't a story, because it happens almost every day, but a man bites a dog is a story. In fact, it's so rare I couldn't actually find a picture to match that one. So there we go. So we've got a lot of people struggling with poor or just a general lack of good housing, which isn't actually all that unusual, sadly. So we've been having to work quite hard as an industry to find new angles, stats and stories. And as I mentioned before, we do this through the research, polling, case studies, and to be honest, a lot of endless internal brainstorming to find new ways to tell this story in a new way so it actually becomes news to the papers. There's also the regional variation which we're trying to tackle. I am so aware that a lot of the stories that you see about the housing crisis are very either London-centric or the South East, and talking about runaway prices and first-time buyers, and that doesn't reflect the housing crisis across the country. I know we've got a lot of areas where it's about regeneration and communities and getting the jobs to match the homes, and that's an area that we're definitely tackling going forward. We're going to be putting out a lot more regeneration stories and all those things. But we need to tell that story of what does the housing crisis look like when there are lots of empty homes in your town? How does this impact on people's lives? How do we link housing to regeneration, to the economy, to people's aspirations? Those are all the kind of the stories we're trying to tell, and it has a lot of resonance with politicians. I think there's a lot about first-time buyers, old children having to move back home. There's a lot that politicians resonate with people's aspirations being supported. I think there's a lot more we can do to link about how housing is integral to local economies, so we're putting out more stories on that coming up, and we're doing some reports around the core cities, a bit like our local home truths, which will show that if we want all these towns of the core cities to be like London, to be these local economic powerhouses, we need to show how housing is an integral part of that. You can't have a fully functioning working city that's profiting and booming with it if it doesn't have the housing to match that. So there's a lot of other angles I think we really need to be pushing up to make people realise that it's also not just a home over people's heads, a roof over their heads rather. So I don't think as a sector we can be lazy in assuming people automatically want to talk about what we do. We need to make a good housing market understandable and relatable to people, make them push for housing. People either have a good home, in which case they're not that fussed, or they're not, in which case they're the ones that we're trying to push. But I think housing is far more a part of the fabric of society, and we kind of need to be showing that a lot more. We've had some stats back with our agency. It shows I think there's 87% of people believe there's a housing crisis, but 86% of people don't think it affects them. And why don't they think it affects them? Maybe it's because we're not telling the story that long commutes or high rents or difficulties in finding a home is actually the housing crisis. The government can do something about it and it does affect them. So, the other things that journalists want, now I realise I'm about to be followed up by a couple of journalists who will do this a whole lot better than me, so I will skip over this slide a bit more quicker. But in what I've experienced of what journalists want, it's the human interest, so the tragic or the triumphant. So we use case studies a lot. We're always desperately coming to you guys, I know, for more case studies. But they really are the strongest leverage, especially regional. We can't really place a story if we don't have a local case study. If you provide the case studies to journalists, you've got the leverage to get a quote in there as well, because they need them to tell the story. They need to make it relatable to the readers, and that's why the case studies come in. Demographic relevance, so we've got the local stories. It has to be of interest to local readers, not just promoting yourself. So always need to find the angle that make it relevant to the person reading the paper rather than just what we want to tell them. And certainly when we're dealing with our statistics and that research, they must always be local. So at the Federation, we don't issue local releases if we can't get the stats at least down to local authority level. If we can only get them at a higher super region level, then obviously we just tailor it to the really big regional papers. But we also produce infographics and graphs that can be uploaded and used and try to kind of sell them in a bit harder that way. We follow on from current news and trending, so if there's something big happening in your area, you can sometimes grab on the back of it and kind of get yourself in that way. A good creative photograph will go a long way. I know especially a lot of regional journalists will tell you they're kind of desperate for help with the content and things, so that's always a very popular thing. And to be honest, we just kind of try to keep it concise and minimum puffery. I think we're quite bad as a sector using a lot of jargon, which we really need to kind of cut down on and actually just keep the focus on the audiences who are reading it. And obviously then there's the exclusives. The downside can be less media coverage, but depending on the strength of the story, I think that's when you make the judgment call as to whether it benefits from having a good exclusive and getting really big pick-up in one paper that follows on, or whether you want to go a bit wider with it. Now, I was asked to also say what I thought the media's views on social housing is, which I think, hence my picture, is a little bit like asking how long is a piece of string, because they have a lot of different views in it. And to be honest, I'm not even sure that's quite the right question. I think journalists have a lot of pages to fill their news for their readers that they want to read, and most of the journalists I've spoken to, and admittedly that is outside the trade press and the Guardian, who I know are very keen on social housing, they haven't really given too much thought about social housing. But all of them that we speak to, they do have plenty of thoughts on what their readers think about how hard it is to buy a home, about affording their rent, about worrying where their children are going to live, about worrying where their parents are going to be able to stay, about whether they're going to be isolated when they're older. So those are the stories that they kind of know resonates with their readers. So what our job is to try and show how housing associations, so how good housing and a good housing market absolutely affects their readers and get in that way. So I kind of pulled together some of the words that they've been asking for us most in some of the stories that they're asking us to help shape, because we do, I think, as a sector, have a role in addressing all of these. So as you can see there's my doody little word cloud of things that they're looking, and a lot of it is around the affordability, it's the case studies, it's the high rents, first-time buyers, getting on the housing ladder, they want trends, they want to know about bad landlords, any data changes, gentrification, groovy architecture, any kind of interesting new builds we're doing. So we do cater to a lot of different audiences, and that I think is a really tough job for us PRs in trying to find a lot of different stories that appeal to a lot of different papers and to keep them all kind of serviced in that way. We have spoken to quite a few, so just to give you an example of some of the people and what they're saying. When we spoke to Jill Sherman, who's a Whitehall editor at the Times, they're quite interested for a quite Tory-friendly paper. They like Tory policies, but they don't like David Cameron at all. And very interested in any case studies where government policy is failing. So I've spoken to her quite a few times when we were still working more on the bedroom tax about how that was failing people. So very interested in those kind of things. Channel 4 we've met with recently, really, really keen on stories focusing around young people primarily. That's their main audience, is the young 20 to 35-year-olds. They've got a huge online presence as well, so they're very, very keen on social media tie-ins as well. So that's a really good way to kind of get both of those across. Local journalists, you all know as yourself, they're often actually more likely to have a dedicated journalist on the issue. That's one problem we do often have with national papers, is why you have a health writer or a health editor or kind of crime writer, you don't actually have a housing one. We tend to flip between personal finance, social policy, property pages, which is more about house prices. So locals can often be much more dedicated on the issue, and I'm very interested, obviously, in the local stories and stats, which is fairly obvious, really. The Evening Standard, I think they're pretty semi-national in their outlook, so I wouldn't really just include them as a London paper. They only ever want exclusives, so when we work with them, that's all we give them. And to be honest, for the reach they have, that kind of works for us to cover off London, and really influential columnists as well, and obviously a very strong ear into the Mayor of London, so that works. Daily Mail struggles to get into this paper, to be honest, unless you're talking about property prices. They do support the welfare cuts. They've said that they only care about house buyers and first-time buyers, as that's their readership. So if there's anything we can do, it will be about the squeeze middle and the struggle to get on that housing ladder, and that's how we'd get into a paper like that and kind of get them more aware of housing. The Metro is hugely read by young renters, which are the key target area that we want to target. People that are desperate for their own homes, affected by the high rents, clearly because it's mainly focused in cities. So that's a really, really good outlet for us to try and get the housing message across to those readers that are actually already bought into how difficult it is. Daily Telegraph we speak to a lot. They love their countryside, very protective of the green belts, and again their readers are usually older and homeowners, so not particularly in tune with the social housing message, but we can get into them by talking more about the nuances of the housing market and how that affects everything, and again on the kind of the economic strength of having good housing and good housing policy. And then The Guardian, which I know we all love because they are the most supportive national paper of social housing and social conscience, but I do have a question of whether the government listens to them as well. So sometimes if we only target them or talk too much to them, there could be a bit of the danger of just talking to ourselves in the room again. And then obviously we've got the trade press as well, but given I'm about to be followed up by Martin, I will leave trade press aside. Somebody far better qualified to talk about it. So what's coming up next for us is, I've gone on to Alex's slide, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. What's coming up next for us is we've got the rally on the 17th of March. So that's when we want you to help us make a huge noise. It's the largest housing rally we've ever had in this country. We'll be doing a lot with national press and local press and taking over all the billboards in Westminster Station, and I think we're going to have inflatable houses and all sorts of exciting things. We'll have a huge social media presence as well, and we're doing a lot in the local press to run up. So we'll be sharing what we're going to do with you all sooner, but we kind of need a lot of help to kind of make that really noisy and really make people realise that it's a big issue. As I mentioned before, we've got the local editorial campaigns coming up. So these ones being picked because they're targeting the key constituencies. So we've got the Oxford Mail, obviously for David Cameron, Manchester Evening News, I think for George Osborne, the Yorkshire Evening Post, the Sheffield Star, because it covers Doncaster and Sheffield, so Clegg and Miliband, and we've also put in the London Evening Standard and the Birmingham Post, just because they're such big areas as well, metropolitan areas. We've got an older people report coming out in a few weeks. There's some really strong stats and angles around that about the ageing population and how we house people as they get older, and how that's another kind of ticking time bomb for the housing crisis. So again, we'll be sharing the stories with you before we put them out, but there's a kind of a lot to be said about that kind of older generation, how the housing market's affecting them, even to the point where we know there's a lot of research that they're actually saving actively to help their grandchildren out with their housing costs as well. And we've also got Core Cities reports coming out in early March. They're a bit like the local home trees reports that we do, but they'll be showing how good housing will really help the regional powerhouses of the core cities. And on top of that, we have a lot of other stories coming out. So what we're really doing until the election is just ramping home that message day in, day out, every single week, of the importance of the housing crisis and housing and what housing associations can do. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. I think some incredibly useful comments there, some really useful context about why this is all important, of course, and a really helpful insight into NatFed's strategy as well. I thought Anna touched on using Twitter, which of course is another sort of another part of the jigsaw puzzle. We're primarily here talking about getting your message out via the press, but of course these days online there's a multitude of opportunities to get your message out without using journalists as well. So that's obviously an important one. And I think there are loads of points there that Anna made, which our other panelists will no doubt pick up on. Thanks very much for the comments that are coming in so far. Keep them coming. Don't forget you can type in your question at any point. For those of you who are really into multitasking, Scott Goodacre has started a movement to get a Twitter conversation going on as well. So if you can type in 2 places at once, do feel free to join him in that endeavour. So the hashtag is IHComms with 2 N's. But without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to our next presenter, Alex Wellman, who's going to take us through that tricky business of getting your stories into the national press. Alex, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be here. Talking about Twitter, it's nice this morning to see a nice message to me on Twitter, because yesterday I got completely battered by people over a story I wrote online. So it's very nice to get that. Just a little bit about myself. I'm currently a reporter on the Daily Mirror Online. Before that, I basically was working on the Daily Mirror as a reporter, night reporter. I also did the Sunday Mirror as a reporter, night reporter, occasional night news editor, and I've also done their Pride of Britain Awards for the last 2 years running. So I'm kind of trying to have a little chat about sort of how best to engage with reporters. Well, it was touched on previously, but well, yeah, what makes a good story for a national newspaper? You're going to try and sell it to a reporter. So the first thing the reporter wants to know is this exclusive? Have I got it to myself? One of the worst things you can hear is you've got this great story being sold to you, and they've already gone and spoken to the Sun beforehand or the Mail, and your thirst and your interest for it instantly goes. You're still willing to do it, but if you've got an exclusive on it, you're going to go that extra yard. You're going to go running up to your news editor saying, "I've got this. It's a cracking story. We've got it to ourselves." The conversation then goes back, tie them up, right? Let's keep them quiet. Let's make sure we do everything we can for them. And if it's exclusive, you get a lot more chance to say what you want. You get a lot more scope to push what you want. In a sort of bargaining with it all. We as the reporter want the story badly, so we're going to bend over backwards to make sure that we get it. Whether that's paying for it or whether that's just saying, yeah, you can have this quote, you can have that in. That's the kind of thing you go for. A second thing is silly. It's fame. I mean, it's one of the easiest sells to a news desk, because as a reporter, basically the story comes onto you and you've got to sell it to the news desk. And by the news desk, I mean the news editor, the sub-editors, the deputy editor, and they're going to take it into the morning conference and then put it up to the editor, and we're then told to go for it or not. If there's someone famous involved, you're flying. You're going to get it much easier. Whether they're well known or whatever, it can be anything. X Factor, pop star, big politician, whoever. It just makes it much easier to sell. And emotion, this is, will it make the readers angry, sad, happy? Will they talk about it to their friends? It's the kind of one where you've got the Mail absolutely specialise in rage and making their readers angry at how the world is dying with welfare state and whatnot, but which is rubbish in my view. But they're specialising in that and doing very well out of it. So you've got to find the emotion in the story when you're selling it to the person. You can't just say that this is happening. What's the impact? How's it going to affect them? And why is it a story? Why are you telling me about it? What impact is it having on your people and who are your tenants? And with that, have you got case studies of it? We need case studies all the time. Touching on the next one, human interest. And I remember a year or two back, Inside Housing had a great story about the bedroom tax, where a mother of a Hillsborough victim was getting taxed on her dead son's room. Now, I saw that and jumped down here and grabbed that story straight away for the National. It was a great story, but only because of the case study. That made that issue and brought it out into the national newspaper. We got into the People and the Sunday Mirror, double-page spread. So that's a huge amount of space on 2 national newspapers. In terms of, again, what makes a story, it's one of the first things you learn at journalism school is the first, last, biggest, smallest, fattest, thinnest. These kind of things are newsworthy. Now, whether they're going to be good for a national is another thing. Your biggest, your most expensive, the biggest amount of money, all that kind of stuff will always do. It sounds silly, your fattest tenants and stuff like this. These funny, weird little ones will get in. And now you might think, I don't necessarily want to talk about that. That's not what we're about. But if you've got the original in, you've got a reporter's ear, you've got someone's phone number, you've got someone's email address that you can go directly to with a separate story. And if they know that you're a good source of stories, they're again going to be much more willing to help you out and listen to the next time you've got something. And relevance. If you're sending stories in on spec, it's got to be relevant to something. With a national newspaper, with a daily, it obviously changes every day. Recently, obviously, terrorism was massively on the front pages because of what happened in Paris. Now, if you've got a story that can somehow tie into that about terrorism, I don't know if there's pressure from local authorities or from higher up to vex tenants or go through their business, whatever. That's coming down. That's a good story, or link it in. Or if you see a national narrative coming in, think, how can I make this work for us? What can I do? Is something happening that we can tell about, which can then be used as a case study? And if we're looking at why does no one reply to your emails, again, on a national newspaper, I think the first thing I'd say is I didn't actually put down on the thing, is that most of the emails will go through to the news desk and then they get filtered out. So if you're not snappy, if you're not grabbing the attention straight away, they're just going to get in the pile of thousands and thousands that come through. So my first thing would be is you've got to find a person to go to. If you know a reporter or someone, if you've made that contact, go to them. Don't just send it on spec to the news desk, news@mirror.co.uk or whatever it is, and expect to get a reply. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're coming in with all the wires, everything from PA, everything from Mercury, all the wires, all the regions, which are ready-made stories by reporters. So we're going to look at them first. Equally, ones that do get through are often far too long. Times of premium on a daily newspaper, national newspaper. You're not going to want to read more than an A4 page. What's the relevance? You might be sending a story about, I don't know, a new building to somebody who writes about crime. You've got to know who you're sending it to. The poor intro, far too many press releases don't sell the story from the beginning. You can read into the 8th or 9th paragraph and find the hook of the story. In reality, it's a press release. You've got to tell me the story straight away and be excited about it yourself. If you're not excited about it, why am I going to be excited about it? The subject, this is a big thing, I think. With the subject category of the emails, that's got to tell the story, because when it comes through as emails, that's what the first thing you see, and 9 times out of 10 you might not even dive into the whole email. If you just got press release, latest housing situation, you're going to skim through it. If there's the angle, a decent angle, family of 5 kicked out by Cameron or something like that, then that's how to sell it. Make it a bit more snappy, as like a headline in the paper that you're going to attract the attention. And this is a bugbear, annoying PRs. I know you guys have got really hard jobs and everything, but I think you've definitely lost count of the amount of time people have been hassling, and then the phone goes down and a reporter calls them all names under the sun and said, I'm never going to be working with them again. You can't be too precious about your story thinking it's the best thing in the world when it might not be, quite simply. If you get the short shrift, just okay, move on and try again, really. But obviously, if you do believe in it, you've got to be persistent. But too much, and it works the other way, and you will almost be, black-carded. And too late. Again, I know that I understand that you've got sort of protocol you've got to go through. But if you're telling us about something which happened 2 weeks ago, it's not going to get in. We need to know beforehand that it's going to happen, or the day it is happening, or the day after that it did happen. You question why you're being told this now half the time, because things just do not come to you at the right time for us. And common fails. Well, I would say, from experience from working on the news desk at night, when it's too slow, well, and on the dailies, you need the info straight away. If you're coming to us with a story and we say that's great, but can you get us this, and this? You say, yeah, we're relying on you to get that. And with the daily, it's got to be done within, ideally before lunchtime, so that we can get it all set and go in the paper. you get back. Some people get back far too slowly. A lackadaisical thing. Again, I know you've got protocols to go through, but you've got to really jump through the hoops if you want to get it in there. Because the reporter themselves is going to, on that day, going to be working on 2 to 3 stories at a time, and they're going to want to finish them ASAP and get them correct. The wrong comment. Again, when a reporter's ringing you up, asking you for a comment, they already have in their head what they want you to say, and they're going to try and sort of encourage you to say it that certain way. So I think the best thing to say is don't be afraid to say, what do you want from me, you know, and if you can't provide it, just say, look, I can't do that, but perhaps try this person, be helpful, pass them on to someone else. If you can say it, just lead yourself into it. Awful photos, yeah, worst thing in the world. We get so many bad photos. I've never, ever had a good photo from any housing story at all in memory. A topping out ceremony with hard hats is rubbish, and they're just pointless. But newspapers will always use a good picture. When I was doing the night reporting and the night news editing, we would always have a page 3 or a page 5 full-page story on a picture, and I would write 3 paragraphs around the picture. And that's not just celebs, it can be anything. And then quotes as well. 9 times out of 10 they're going to be cut, because you understand you've got to squeeze in your CEO and your tenant's heads, but it's almost not worth doing, really. You've just got to say what it's about again. How best to pitch? The first thing is just to find out about the newspaper. If it's a weekly, the day after it's out is the best time, because that's when they're looking for stories. If it's a daily, try and get there before morning conference. Morning conference usually about 11 AM, because the reporter's going to take it in. Again, as I said before, get to a reporter. That's the point of call. They're the person who's going to write it and sell it to their news editor. So you need to find them. You need to get their email, their phone, their Twitter, and have them on speed dial, so you can access them directly. Be quick, yeah. Just tell them it straight. Again, times at a premium on a national newspaper. Be as quick as you can, straight in on it. And again, be persistent. We forget things on newspapers. If things like come back to us, forget, and they get put on the back burner. Don't be afraid to call back. Don't email because they get lost. Call. Tailor it to the publication. The Mirror, we're very left-leaning, so obviously we're going to have that sensibility. That's how it works for us. Just check the political stance of the newspapers. The Mirror and the Telegraph are the 2 papers to have never changed their political allegiance in any election. No generic thanks for chatting just now emails. They meet, you know, everyone knows that they're just copied and pasted, and they're not to you. And similar to the previous one, be adaptable. You know, the reporter's going to try and change the story to a way that will suit them. If you can do it, go with them and try and work with them on sort of bartering to get what you want in there, and you know, don't just discount it straight away, because again, the reporters remember things. They like people they can go back to. The main thing for a reporter is contact. Very quickly, touching on print versus digital. You know, in this day and age, I know everyone focuses on print, and I'm not just saying this because I'm online now, but online is really where it's going. In the Mirror, we sell about 1 million copies a day print, but online we get up to 6 million hits a day. With that, digital stories are shared on Facebook, Twitter, and all of these things, so they can live on and on and on for weeks and weeks and weeks. At any one grab, we can have 17,000 people reading a story, and that's like a second look at the newspaper. Online, it's much easier to get a story in because you've got to do a lot more. We can do up to 12 stories a day, quickly, straight out. And again, you may think it's less it has less gravitas, which is true, but more people read it these days, and it's a lot easier to get stories online because they're absolutely desperate for it. And also, if it's a good story online, it will get picked up by the newspaper and will go in on the next day's newspaper as well. And just sort of very briefly touching on local newspapers, I've worked on several in my time. It's probably one of the easiest times ever to get stories in on the local newspapers because they're massively under-resourced, particularly in London. You may have one reporter working on them at the moment, so they need pictures, they need contacts, they need tips, and they need stories. I mean, if you're driving to work and you see an accident happening, you know, ring up the local paper and let them know who you are. Just give them a tip. Work with them, become a contact who knows things, and then they remember you. And again, it's easier to sell stories. What you've got to do is make it as easy as possible for yourself to sell stories to them, and that's the way to work it. pictures that are always needs the same as the nationals, and that's how it is, really.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Alex, for that. A lovely bit of tough love there, I think. Either that or he's not trying to make too many friends. So there you have it. Don't be an annoying PR and ditch the hard hat photos because they're not going to make it in. But some really useful tips there from Alex. And I can see we've got quite a lot of questions coming back, Alex. So steel yourself for those in just a moment. But now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Martin, who's going to take us through what you should be doing to target the trade press, how we differ from the national press. So, Martin, over to you.
Great, thanks, Emma. Yeah, I'm going to kick off with a roundup of who we are, how to get an idea picked up by us, and common ways, problems that cause pitches to fall flat. So, yes, without further ado, I'll kick off with a look at basically what we're looking to do. Sorry, my slide is struggling to pop up, which is why I'm hesitating for a second. I'm going to kick off anyway with looking at, yes, my slides seem not to be working, so hopefully somebody can scroll down for me.
Yeah, I'll scroll down for you, Martin.
Thank you very much. Right. So yes, start off with who we are. Daily news, features, comment and analysis online, including a roundup of the breaking stories from inside housing and beyond on our live blog. So that's kind of us, and that's what we do. The magazine contains in-depth analysis, data, and the biggest stories of the week. Right, here we are. We're working. Brilliant. Right, so just start with, I was asking Carl, who's our news editor, for some of the kind of running themes that we're going to be majoring on over the course of the coming year. So we think these are the big stories, the big themes you need to be thinking about as organisations, and certainly in terms of running narratives, these are the kind of things we're going to be interested in covering because they're going to have a huge impact on the sector, housing associations and councils as businesses and residents at the end of the day, so right across the board. So I'll just run through them very quickly, and I'm going to keep this quick because I want to get to the question and answer session because I think that's going to be very useful for all of us. But we've got house building, that's going to be a huge issue this year, both in terms of the election. Clearly that's going to be the main housing issue that actually the politicians are going to be interested in talking about. But also in terms of the sector, we've got one programme coming to an end and the next programme, development programme, kicking off. So huge issues for housing associations there. So in terms of what we're there to do, communicate who's doing well, how they're doing it, tips that people can pick up on, and areas that people can learn. That's what we're really interested in there. Technology, just a huge issue going forward. Again, in terms of how the sector can learn, how we can share learning and help people pick up on the best tech and the best tips that are out there. I'm going to whisk through the rest. Value for money, really big issue. Again, we've got the value for money statements coming out, possibly after house building, the issue that MPs and councillors and the general public want to talk about more than any other in terms of housing associations. So I think getting your messages straight and clear on that for both the trade, the national press, and indeed your local press and councillors and MPs is vital. Regulation, huge area for us, one of the most read areas on our website and most commented. Again, really, we'll be telling you what the regulator thinks, where they're going to direct their attention, all vital for the sector, and we're also keen to hear stories, find out how that impacts on landlords' thinking and behaviour and their balance sheets at the end of the day. Welfare, I think we've kind of covered that a bit so far, but again, a huge issue, really big for people's businesses moving forward. Keen to understand over the coming year as well what people's thinking is, both going into the election, how they're planning in terms of their budgets for the next few years, and then obviously after the election, what's going to happen then, vital for the future of the sector. Planning, again, where you're building, how much you're building, whether you can build. We want to talk to you about what you're doing and how successful you're being. And again, the perception of social housing, ties into some of the things we talked about already, but it's going to be a vital thing for you to be thinking about, both with us and nationally and locally. Right, so we can click on to the next one. What we'll be asking you for when you call us? Statistics. And I'm glad I put my teeth in this, probably because I've been struggling with that. Yeah, but basically this is one of the most common things that's missing when people write to us, call us with stories, vague news, but basically, so you'll have something that sounds good, but if you can't actually back it up and tell us why you're doing it, or if you have done it, what it's achieved, basically what people can pick up on when they're reading it. So I mean, if you're a chief exec of another housing association, if you're a councillor, looking after a housing department, why should you do this too? What's of interest to you? So that's why that's vital to us. Right. Sorry, click on to the next one. Yes. What makes a good story for a trade magazine? So I'll again whisk through this. Context, very important for us to understand. Is this the first time it's been done? How does it fit nationally? How does it fit with your agenda locally? What picture is it fitting into? If we don't understand that, we're going to struggle to know where to place it and what to do with the story. Very, very, very important for us to have an understanding of that at the outset. Significance, will it affect others? So that comes in terms of learning for the rest of the sector. Really interested in things that can be picked up on that are replicable, but also how big an impact is it going to have in your local area. All these kind of things that people can pick up on. Yeah, come to the learning point. The impact. Talk to us about what impact it's going to have on you, your finances, your reputation, the communities you serve, all of that. Quite often we get press releases that come through that don't really touch on that at all, so it's quite difficult for us to understand why we should be covering. So really focus on that. And uniqueness. Are you different? Are you breaking new ground? Really, really important stuff. So just think about it. Would you be interested? Would your organisation be interested in reading it if it wasn't you sending the press release through? So that's the key question to be asking. Right. Questions we'll always ask. Part one: is it exclusive? Our reputation is built on breaking news and delivering kind of data and analysis that's unique to us. So, I mean, if you send us a release and it's very, very clear it's gone round the houses and it's going to be appearing everywhere, to be honest, as a journalist, you kind of switch off straight away. So you're still interested in the significance and the context, and obviously we'll cover some of that stuff. But actually, as a professional, you're immediately less interested when you realise that every other publication out there's got it. Questions always asked part two. If this is so good, why can't you give us any detail about cost? Just a hugely common failing. Okay, again, sounds brilliant, but where's the detail? Can you prove it is brilliant? Right. Common problems. Alex has already mentioned terrible pictures. Here's the type of picture we get through an awful lot. Really an incredible amount. It doesn't tell the story. It's boring to look at. And while everybody, one person looks like they're having a good time, it's not bringing anything to life. So the alternative is the right kind of picture. So a picture that tells the story, shows what's happening, is fun, lots of life in it, basically tells the story in a picture. but it might sound obvious, but the huge number of things we get through that don't do this, I think it's worth labouring the point. And this is just a brief bit of information about what to include. With any picture stories you send through, and pretty good guide for most stories as well. What's happening? When did it happen? Are the pictures exclusive to us? And detailed captioning information. This is so often missing as well. So names, places, and who took the photos. We need to credit them. Right. Here are the things that shake our confidence if we're getting an email or having a chat to you on the phone. Being vague about details I've already touched on, but if you don't have control of the details, we immediately start to get a little bit shaky about whether we should be running the story. So be able to get back to us with the details, even if you don't have them when you call through. But generally speaking, costs, numbers of people affected, why you're doing it, all of that kind of stuff. Being obstructive when we're asking about this kind of thing, we're doing it for a reason, which is to hopefully help and inform the sector as much as we possibly can. We're not really doing it for fun or to be annoying. There tend to be important details, and in actual fact, if you kind of shut us down or are reluctant to respond to some of those inquiries, again, shakes the confidence, much less likely to appear in inside housing from that point on. And then just on an individual basis, history of pushing stories with little news value and history of promising more than you can deliver, both of which are relatively common failings, and again just mean that we're perhaps slightly less receptive when you call, if you say called numerous times before but not actually delivered the story, or promised comment pieces and they haven't actually transpired. Just things to be thinking about. The feature section, we've got our forward features list, which is on our website, and again, we plan the feature section more than a month in advance. So if you're calling 2 weeks out from one of these specials, saying, I notice you've got, say, the South East special coming up in 2 weeks' time, or I know you've got the finance supplement next week, is there anything we can get in it? The answer at that stage will be no. We'll have planned that. There won't be any space left. Features take a long time to pull together, just in terms of the detailed information we're collecting, and the time taken to pull them together is reasonably large. So just think about that. Look at what's coming forward, but don't pitch at the last minute, because you won't stand much chance of success. Right, getting the pitch right. When you call us or send an email through, be concise. I know Alex has already touched on this. It's the same for us as for any other publication. If we don't understand the message pretty quickly, then we're going to struggle, and you're going to struggle to get in the magazine. Again, it does happen a reasonable amount of the time, so really something to focus on. Pitch to the right person. We'll come back to this in a moment, but make sure you're targeting the person who covers, who's the expert in the field on the magazine, who's going to be the most open to covering your story, and in actual fact is more likely to be aware of the background and be able to pick up on it quickly and sell it to the news desk. Get the timing right. So if there's events you want the feature section to cover, again, plenty of advance notice so we can get along. If it's in the news diary, give us plenty of advance notice, just so, again, it can be plugged into the news lists and people can actually be given time to attend, and prepare case studies for features. Again, if we're asking for that and it takes 2 weeks to come through, real problem for us time-wise. Right. And the other thing you can do is get us involved. And this is a prime example here. That's our executive editor, Nick Duxbury, in Training to the Marathon, with various housing figures. That's from a couple of years ago. I still don't think we've bettered that outfit, but we are keen to get involved with the sector as much as possible in terms of campaigning, in terms of events that you're running. So just let us know about them, give us notice, and we'll try and get involved but I'm not sure Nick's up for wearing that outfit again, to be absolutely honest. Right, and I'll round off with the other thing which I was talking about earlier, who you're going to call. It's really important to get the right person if you're pitching. So I've got a list here of, I mean, this is obviously email addresses and phone numbers. If you're pitching features, best to call Jess, and again with plenty of notice. I also work on features, so you can pitch to me directly. But the most important thing for the news section is to target your calls directly. If you call me with a news story, to be absolutely honest, what I'm going to end up doing is pitching it to Carl effectively, and really explaining the story again to somebody else if I'm passing it on. So the best way to actually get across is to speak to the expert in the field directly. You've got Carl Brown, who's the news editor. He looks after the news section online and in the magazine, so across the board. And then you've got people like Pete, who's our business reporter, Heather, who covers areas like care and support, Scotland, Dan, who's planning. Basically, it's all online. Go and have a look on the website. But really important to target your calls to the right person. Can't stress that enough, because quite often I think stories get missed because you pitch to the wrong person who sits on the story for a day or two, or waits for the right person to get into the office, and at that time, stories die. So have a think about who you're pitching to and target it rightly. And I think one of our Q&A said, ask if it's a good time to speak. That's also, there's one press officer who will remain nameless who somehow always calls me on a Wednesday afternoon, which is when we go to press with the magazine. The workflow's much steadier now than it used to be, but still there are times at which you're less likely to be successful, and we're going to be pushed and have less time to listen. So do a bit of research on that and have a bit of a think about when you're talking to us. Right, I think we'll move on to the questions.
Thanks very much, Martin. I note with interest that Mike Parker asks whether Martin is interested in taking part in a sponsored walk or cycle in the North East as part of the Homes for Britain rally.
Walk, yes, cycle, no.
I'm not sure how productive it was for you sharing that picture with Nick, although I thought that picture of Nick in the genie outfit was rather spectacular. I might need to create a rule where it's vital to wear the outfit during our news meeting or something. Thanks very much indeed to Martin. We're a couple of minutes over the end of our allotted time now, but there's still plenty of you here. There's one more presentation to go and the Q&A. So I think what we'll do is we will soldier on, and those of you who are able to continue to join us, then please stick with us. That's great, and others perhaps you may wish to tune in to the download when that goes up onto our website early next week, and then you'll be able to catch the Q&A session. I'm going to quickly press on and just share a few thoughts about the changes that we're going to be making to Inside Housing in the coming weeks, which will just build really on favour of some of the additional opportunities that you've got to influence what we're doing and to get your stories out there, really. We're going to be making some changes, and the sort of key aim of those changes really is to make sure that Inside Housing is as responsive as possible to our core readers and is as reflective as possible of you. And there are three sort of key elements of that, really. The first is providing you with everything that you need in one place, and that means providing breadth of coverage and depth of coverage as well. So Inside Housing really being a sort of one-stop shop for housing professionals. The second aim is to make Inside Housing the home of really informed debate, something which is not available in the wider media, and really trying to sort of get to the heart of matters, not just sort of debating things on the surface and sort of rehearsing the same tired old arguments, but really sort of getting to the heart of matters. And the third element is that we want to create our content for, but also with you as housing professionals, so really involving you in what we're doing. So what does that actually mean in practice? At the heart of it really is us relaunching a new and improved digital offer for subscribers, and that means that we're redesigning the website. It will have improved navigation, the design will be refreshed, and there will be a host of new features and some new functionality on there as well. It will be more interactive and more responsive. And as part of that, we'll be producing digital editions of the print mag, so you'll be able to view those on your computer or on a tablet device. And we're also launching a tablet app as well, so that you can see the weekly print edition, but on an app. And within the site itself, we're making a whole host of changes really to make the site an essential destination for housing professionals. So to just go through those sort of three key aims in a little bit more detail, on that point around breadth and depth, really we've been looking at what the role of print and the role of web is, and I think like many publications, obviously our history is in our print offer to you, but the web, of course, is hugely important now and is becoming more important all the time. So what we focused our efforts on initially is making what we're able to offer you more agile, more focused, and improving what we can give you online. And in doing that, we'll be able to offer you that breadth and that depth. The first element of that, something that you may well be familiar with already. That's our new Housing Live blog, which we sort of launched in beta just before Christmas, and which is kind of growing in popularity and is really starting to make an impact. The idea of that blog is that we open it up first thing in the morning and we run it during the course of the day, and we use it to break stories as soon as they happen, so we don't have to wait until somebody's written a news story. We can break something in the blog as soon as it happens. It means that we can analyse stories which perhaps have been widely reported in the wider media, but without us actually having to rewrite them. And it means we can reflect debate, so we can pick up on conversations that are happening on Twitter and elsewhere, things that are happening at conferences or whatever it might be, and we can sort of roll all of that into one place. So really the idea of that blog is that it becomes a kind of a shop window for everything that Inside Housing is doing on that given day, but also housing more generally. So it will refer to articles on the web more widely, and we may bring you the Housing Live blog from a particular conference or event on a given day if there's something really interesting going on. That means that we've got more flexibility. And it means that because we can break those stories really quickly on the blog, it means that actually we can focus our efforts more on producing more exclusive articles and the stuff that you really can't get elsewhere, because that's what gives you greater value. And as part of that, then we're making better use of data. Underpinning that change really is moving across to a web-first approach. In the past, we've tended to save most of our exclusive off-diary stories and break them in print on a Friday, and then you've seen that manifested online by a huge number of stories appearing on the website on a Friday, and lots of interesting stuff all happening on one day. We're now breaking stories online first, which means that we are breaking things as they happen, whether they're on diary or whether they are exclusive. We're spacing out news and features across the week so that there's a more even flow on the website, and that every day on the website there's a really good exclusive story that you won't find elsewhere. The second of our three aims was to make sure that Inside Housing is hosting essential and informed debate about what's going on in the sector, about the challenges for the future, about how we tackle the housing crisis, and many of those issues that are being picked up in the Q&A and so on. We are really increasing the breadth and depth of the expert opinion and analysis that we're providing, and making sure that we've got articles from the most influential thinkers across the housing sector and indeed outside it. We're doing that predominantly through a new panel of contributors, the Inside Housing 50, who are a hand-selected group who we've invited to to write for us. There'll be a new piece from one of those panellists going up on the website every single day, which means that there's always a kind of a thought for the day. There's always a something to engage with and get you thinking. And beyond that, there will be more opportunities to comment more generally. In the Q&A earlier on, Jeremy asked whether we were still looking for panellists for the Inside Housing 50. We're in the process of sending out invites at the moment, so if you can get in really quickly and send a suggestion, then please do. But if you're not geared up to be able to respond quite that quickly, never fear, because we'll be taking more and more comment pieces on the website than we have before, and Emily Twinch, our web editor, is the person to get in contact with about that. We, as part of the changes that we're making, we're going to be ending the culture of anonymous commenters on our stories, and we're going to be encouraging people to really think of their online accounts as a sort of professional networking and professional forum. So we're going to be encouraging people to comment under their own names and to really be getting to the heart of matter and having a really kind of sensible and informed debate as part of that. So that's all about putting debate front and centre. The final of our three objectives really is putting readers at the centre of what we do and giving you much more of an opportunity to give us feedback on what we're doing and how we're doing it, and also to sort of shape the coverage that we're making for the future. So there's going to be several ways for you to do that. Firstly, we're going to be more transparent about what we're doing, give you an insight into the editorial team, the decisions we're making and how we work, and we're going to be doing that via a new behind-the-scenes blog, as yet unnamed, so if you've got any brainwaves, do feel free to get in touch and let us know. But that's going to share some thinking on our editorial lines and so on, and of course, if you're familiar with that, it might give you more of an opportunity to feedback your thoughts on when you think we've got it right and when you think we've got it wrong. We're going to be launching a feedback panel, which will be a group of people who we go to on a regular basis to ask for their sort of thoughts and feedback on everything from sort of featured topics to news coverage and much more. And then beyond that, for housing organisations, we are looking at creating branded pages for individual organisations that will enable you to post information and blogs and to get involved much more in what we're putting together. We're doing this via our new communications network, which we're just in the process of sort of scoping out now. So that is certainly an opportunity for you to get involved. So the idea of the network is that we can come to you to ask for case studies, for surveys, for ideas, and even for comments on stories. It'll mean that we're able to sort of reach out to a much wider group and really sort of broaden the range of comment that we're getting in our stories and so on. In return, you can come to us with suggestions, and also you can curate your own space on the site, those branded homepages that I mentioned a moment ago. We're going to be putting together an initial version and piloting the network over the course of the next month or so. So if you're interested in taking part in that, do get in touch with Nick Duxbury of Genie fame, who will be very pleased to hear from you, and his email address is on the screen now. So I'm going to wrap up there, because we're certainly pushing our luck when it comes to timing. Before we wind up, we've had loads and loads of questions. Lots of them have been answered by the panellists as we've been going through. So I'm just going to pick through a few of the highlights and do a bit of a quick fire to our panellists with some of the questions which they may be able to help on. I'm going to. We had loads of questions for you, Anna, and I'm going to slightly pick on you first, if I may. So I'll just pull together 2 or 3 of the questions that I think the audience might be interested in picking up on. There are some nitty-gritty ones here. Firstly, how do we engage those people who already own a home, and essentially how do we tackle NIMBYism, because that's clearly one of the big issues when looking at some of the solutions to the housing crisis. And a sort of a slightly related question. Laura, who's based in the northeast, says the housing crisis in the northeast is quite different from some of the messages that are being put out there about how it's experienced in London and the south. How, as a sector, do we manage to keep our messaging consistent? And a third one, if I may, and I can remind you of these in a minute if you need that, is a very specific question about any particular journalists who you feel are really influential on housing issues. So, Anna, can you help us out with any of those?
Sure, I counted 4 there, Emma. Okay. Yeah, they're all really good questions, and some of them I was trying to type away at, and I promise I will finish off any after this. I'm not a very fast typer. Take the first one first on engaging people who already have their own home. This is a real problem with housing generally when we try to talk about it, and when promoting housing associations, because if you've already got your own home, to be honest, you're quite happy with house price increases, and you're kind of sitting there pretty. So the way we're trying to engage them, and that is a certain problem for us, because a lot of Telegraph readers, Daily Mail readers, there's a lot of people that just don't think they're affected, but they will know people who are. So we do go down that route. So they will be like the squeeze middle. A lot of them, when we did polling recently, we found a lot of parents are actually still helping their children. These are grown-up adult children with their housing costs well into their 20s and 30s. They're helping them save for deposits. They've got a lot of older children in their 20s who would have traditionally moved out of home by now and be settled moving back into home. I can list quite a few friends who have had to do that, to move back in. Then they've also got the worry of older parents as well. So as I said, we'll be addressing an older people report coming up, but they actually do have a lot of pressure, these people, even in their own homes, because there's pressure of changing families, changing dynamics, children that they may want to get on the ladder, older parents that they may need to be starting to worry about where they're going to live or adapt their homes or how to pay for their care. So there are quite a few ways to get in there, and then on a broader sense we'll also be kind of tackling the issues of how housing improves whole communities and towns as well, which slightly links me into, I think it was Laura's question in the North East, which I did get back to her more privately on because I couldn't answer her question in 200 characters. So that is the question of what do you do about the housing crisis and how do you describe it when it isn't just about runaway house prices. We still know that in the North East, I think house prices and deposits are still about 8 times the salary, so they still are pretty unaffordable by most people, but we've got a lot of different issues up there, and as I was saying earlier, there's a lot that we need to be doing more about talking about regeneration. What do you do when you've got streets of empty homes? How do you make that? How do you make the jobs link back? I think there's a lot of housing associations can talk about apprenticeships. I've heard that in some areas, often housing associations are the last man standing in towns where they're trying to keep communities together, create jobs, regenerate homes, and a lot of other businesses have moved out. So those are a lot of the issues that we want to be exploring and talking about, and we certainly will be over the next few months. So if I could put a quick appeal out, if anyone's got good examples of what they're doing locally or different angles, we'll be all ears, because this is a really, really important issue. I'm very aware that a lot of what's covered in the press is kind of a very southeast story or a south mainly story of runaway housing prices, and it's just not reflective of the whole country. And there's a lot of towns that kind of need to get their housing sorted in very different ways. So I think as a challenge to the sector and as to us, we need to get those stories out a lot more. To come back and tackling the NIMBYism kind of comment, we've got the Yes Homes campaign, obviously, which does that. We support that on a campaign side, and I think we've got over 40,000 campaigners now doing that at a local level. Again, I think that comes back to a lot of the same points about how you engage people who already own their own home. There's an awful lot of people that live in modern homes yet oppose other new developments, and I think by focusing on the younger generation and the have-nots a lot more, we can be tackling the NIMBYism aspect. Daily Telegraph, we've still got a lot of pushing to do, but there's a lot of stories around Greenbelt, which we'll put out probably a bit more after the election, about the kind of land and the way we use it in the housing. I know we've got some stats I'm trying to use. I think 4% of our land is built for gardens and only 1% for homes. There's a lot of kind of strong stuff out there that I think we can push, and a lot of NIMBYism I think is probably best tackled at a very local level, where people can see the difference it makes in local areas rather than a national picture where it kind of plays to their mind of not wanting it in their own backyard garden. But there's a lot of examples I know where actually it's just a few houses going up here or there, or bigger ones where it keeps schools open or pubs and local businesses going. So I think we can tackle that more. And in terms quickly of the journalists that are most influential, I did try to answer that one. It was another really hard one to do in 200 characters. Because again, it's a bit like how long is a piece of string. We work a lot with the Times, as I said briefly when I was responding. I know the Times is the most read newspaper by MPs and journalists, but they'll also be paying a huge attention to their local papers, hence why we're doing local campaigning as well. They're in their constituency every Friday. On the national front, the Sun would try to get into a lot through the consumer writers. That's a much more difficult one, even though they're a prime audience for what it is that we want to say, and prime readers. We speak a lot to kind of, I know Alex Johnson at The Independent, and I go blank on names, but Jill Sherman a lot at the Times, I think is good. It's often the leader writers as well, so David Aronovich, I know we're working with as well to get editorial out on. And even in the things like Conservative Home as well, we're trying to tack on, get more pieces in that, because that really does kind of get to the root of people we're trying to reach. So I can easily, I'm not great with names, as anyone in the office will tell you, so I can easily kind of post up afterwards a good list of long names for each of the outlets, if that's easier for people.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. I've got a couple of questions for Alex and Martin, and then we're going to wrap up. Alex, a couple of interesting ones for you. Firstly, how would our listeners go about promoting more positive stories, which is something that's a great challenge for all. There was somebody, William, I think, who said he was really worried about your comment about being more adaptable. So a second attempt to persuade him that that's a good idea, and why he should do that.
Well, when I say adaptable, what I mean really is just be prepared to be. You don't have to be, but let them know early on if you can't provide that is the thing. If you can, and you think you can kind of turn around what they're looking for, then do it and actually achieve it. But if you can't, don't try and fail. But it's just sort of things about it, because the reporter will have an angle of the story. The news editor will probably have told them, let's get this. So they're trying to find someone who can provide them with that. And if you can, or if you think you can, don't dismiss it straight out of hand. Is what I'm saying. You can always find ways to get this angle on a story, and it won't necessarily be a bad story. It can be a good one. In terms of getting better stories into the paper, I think it comes down to case studies, because unfortunately bad news sells more. You only need to look at the stories that are shared on social networks from the Mail or whoever. It's always this benefit cheat, blah blah. There's fattest people in the world are getting a wedding on our benefit. That kind of stuff always goes crazy. But if you get case studies with good stories, then that's the best way to do it.
And perhaps say something brief about the Pride of Britain, and might another be an opportunity for people to get positive stories out there.
Thank you. I wanted to bring this up because every year I tend to do the Pride of Britain awards. I'm sure you all know it. It runs on ITV each year in November. I generally do all the key research and organise the whole thing with the editor. And we never, ever get submissions from housing associations or housing providers, anything of any worth anyway. And every year, my editor's on at me saying we want a positive story coming from the housing sector. Generally, they want a story where people have taken it upon themselves to help clean up at a space, or battle antisocial behaviour, or grab it and take things forward. And we never get them. And I end up having to ring around dozens of charities and housing associations and things like that, and we never get them. So do think about things like that. Obviously awards tied to newspapers are a great way of getting the story in. With the Pride of Britain, we'll end up doing features, double-page spreads, online, in print, and on the TV as well.
Excellent. That sounds like a pretty good opportunity to me. So there's a challenge to you. Make sure you have a look at that and see whether there's anything. Sounds like a good opportunity both for to recognise frontline staff and tenants who have had strong involvement. So that sounds like a really good opportunity. Right, last couple of questions which I am going to field to Martin. Martin, does it put you off if a piece has been already on an organisation's website or on social media, And secondly, what's the best way to follow up on a press release? Should people email? Should they ring? What's the best way for them to chase if they haven't heard anything?
In terms of whether it puts me off, if it's been on an organisation's website, the answer is it can do. I think at that point you're aware that the story is out in the public domain in some way, shape or form. You immediately start to ask questions about whether anybody else has picked it up, so whether it's been in the local press, and actually you start to ask questions also about whether you're adding value to that piece of information. It's out there in the public domain. What are we adding to it? What is it communicating it to the wider public? But yeah, I would start to ask some questions if it has already been on an organisation's website. But that's not to say, if it's a story that hasn't been picked up or contains some information that really would be of great use to people in other organisations. It's not to say we would rule this out, but it would certainly make us a bit more cautious. The second question was...
And the second question was how to follow up on press releases if you haven't had a response from a journalist.
Yes, it's probably a common one for the audience. Basically, give us a call. Always happy to have a conversation, and if we're not going to use something, talk you through the reasons why, so you stand a better chance of success next time. We do get an awful lot of emails per day, possibly not the thousands that Alex was talking about earlier, but definitely sometimes in the hundreds. On busy days, and certainly up to 100 on most days. So there's always a chance that your email will have been scanned and missed. We might have missed its significance. Give us a call and talk us through why it's significant and why it deserves to go in. So that's right.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Martin. I think really now probably is the time to wrap up. Thank you very much indeed to those of you who have stuck with us right until the end. I would like to say a big thank you to our panel, to Anna Brosnan, Alex Wellman and Martin Hilditch, and to Nick Duxbury, who was the mastermind behind this and is sat quietly here, which is most unlike him. So thank you very much indeed to our panel. Thank you to you for your participation and for your questions. A reminder that you can download the presentations and the transcript of the answers that have been given in the Q&A box during the course of the webinar. That will be available on the Inside Housing website in the next couple of days. You can get to that by going to the events section and clicking on webinars, or just by going to insidehousing.co.uk/events/webinars. Those of you watching live will receive a feedback form, so please do complete that. It helps us to shape future events. Apologies for the slight late running of this and for the sound issues that some of you have been experiencing. We'll look into why that is, and on the Inside Housing team we'll be going back through the Q&As and trying to pick up anything that we haven't had an opportunity to answer. So thank you very much indeed to everyone, and we'll be back with more webinars in the coming weeks. So keep an eye out for those. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.
Thanks, bye.